Welcome to Salamone, the podcast. With me, Michael Salamone. This week, why Bernie or bust is actually America or bust. Are you ready for oligarchy? Well, if not, you better be on board with Bernie. I'm going to rant about some stuff. Join me. I'm Michael Salamone. This is my show. Yep. Welcome to Salamone. I'm Michael Salamone, and now a Sala show. I've no guests this episode. I want the conversation to be between us, dear listeners. I'm going to give you my take, and I invite you to contact me through michaelsalamone.com if you want me to hear your take. I promise I'll read every email, social media message, tweet I receive, and respond if I can. The show gets more listeners than I ever imagined, and that's amazing, and I thank you, but we don't interact, so let's change that. Because what I have to say today is important. It's an emergency, and it involves the success of every American and the strength of our entire country. But I'll get to that, because like anything, I have to start at the beginning. This week I want to talk to you about the Bernie or bust movement. I've brought up the progressive revolution both on the show and in my weekly column, but we haven't gone to this particular area yet, and I think we should. I'll likely rant about some other stuff along the way. I tend to do that, but thanks for joining me while I do. So, the Clinton camp has been emailing their supporters to pressure the Bernie supporters in their lives to pledge to vote for Hillary in the general election. This pisses progressives like me off to no end, because it's the same crap we've experienced from party leadership these last 10 months, telling us to shut up and accept the nominee they want us to have. Our vote doesn't count. The DNC preordained the candidacy of Hillary Clinton. Voters be damned. Then they limited the debates. They hid the debates. They made shady fundraising deals with the Clinton campaign and sent attack dogs out on the surging insurgent, Bernie Sanders. The DNC believes we should put party before policy, and many progressives like me just can't go there anymore. So some clever progressive somewhere came up with the nuclear option, and nearly 1 million of us have signed a pledge to participate. It's called Bernie or Bust. Since the progressive wing of the Democratic Party has been denied a fair primary process under the leadership of Hillary Clinton's former campaign co-chair, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the Democrats only win when there's large voter turnout. So many of us who likely, let's be frank, would have never voted for a Clinton again in our lives anyhow. A number of us have pledged to write in Bernie Sanders no matter what happens in the Democratic primary, the corrupted Democratic primary, the rigged Democratic primary, because the DNC needs to be punished for corrupting the democratic process within the Democratic Party. So there are two major arguments against Bernie or bust. The first is just about process. People don't even know how to write in a candidate anymore, which is a real shame, because it used to be a popular thing to do. That's how we had the Smothers Brothers, Pat Paulson thing, and a few insurgent candidates throughout the year who weren't affiliated with any party. And it's been a great way of keeping America's two-party system a little bit in check. You see, I think the act of only voting for the dictated choices is what keeps us trapped in a two-party system. I mean, sure, you could vote Green Party, but if you actually agreed with the Green Party, why haven't you joined the Green Party? If you're a Democrat, you want to save your party from becoming permanently the GOP light beer. You need to fight for the soul of your party. And if a million or people or more write in Bernie Sanders if he were to lose the nomination, though I don't think he will, it'll make a grand statement. People that it would take notice. I mean, unlike his campaign, it would have to be reported on. If Hillary Clinton were to lose a general election by a small margin, as every pollster and poll pretty much predicts she will, but a larger margin than she loses by, wrote in Bernie Sanders, well, then the DNC has to change leadership. And frankly, they have to look to the progressive wing, the Warren wing of the party, because the corporatists would have lost the midterms and the White House consecutively. In the major leagues, unlike the minors like the Green Party, losers don't get to keep losing. In the major leagues, you got to try to win, and you got to change up the team if that's what it takes. So, how do you write in a candidate? Well, you need to request a paper ballot, so you can write in the candidate of your choice. Very few electronic voting machines offer this option. Some do have the capability for writing in, but if you ask for I think they're calling it a manual ballot last time I voted. I asked for a paper ballot just to be certain how that process still worked. And if you vote by mail, this may be a minor inconvenience to you. The last time I got a mail-in ballot, it didn't have any write-in options. So I had to go down to vote in person. But let me tell you a personal story about write-in campaigns and how they're an effective form of protest. Because, about a decade ago, living in Western New York, my state senator dropped dead. And there was a special election to find a new one. The Republicans were so confident in beating the Democrat who said she'd go for the seat that they announced the GOP candidate at the fanciest restaurant in the area, a $1,000 a plate function. So I was a newspaper editor at the time, and I complained about this in my column in the paper quite a bit. And then when they announced this $1,000 a plate function, I used it as a talking point of how out of touch they are with the constituents, because we lived in a struggling post-industrial age part of Western New York. So I said that I was going to make a major announcement at the local dive bar's upcoming 50-cent beer night. Well, I announced to a full crowd that week over those 50-cent beers with my fellow common man. But when I announced, I said I'd be voting for the Democratic candidate. And I asked my supporters to please consider doing the same, but if they would not, to please consider me as a write-in protest vote. I announced that I wouldn't make shirts or lawn signs or buttons, but I encourage supporters to do their own if they like. I offered to speak anywhere invited, but then the weird stuff started happening. The female lead of the area's most popular band, Big Leg Emma, she started wearing in public these homemade Vote Salamone shirts. One of the houses near Jamestown, New York's public library erected a giant Vote Salamone for State Senate sign. There were other signs too, but I'll never forget that one. It was like the biggest billboard I've ever seen. People were making little homemade Vote Salamone State Senate buttons. Strangers were stopping me on the street to tell me they were looking forward to learning how to write me in. You see, people love a good protest vote. Now, I mean, I obviously didn't win that election. Neither did the Democrat I endorsed, but the hardline Republican who won that office had to soften her touch for a while. It was talked about. I brought attention to a off-season, middle of the year, not even regular voting period election that got really good turnout. So you see, there was some success to it. And thankfully, because I don't think I would have been a very good state senator, that success was in the protest and in the activity. Because you see, people love a good protest vote. Afterwards, strangers stopped me to tell me about their write-in voting experience. They love telling that story about this weird campaign and how they wrote in a candidate, because people love a good protest vote. So there are several online petitions to pledge to write in Bernie Sanders should he not win the Democratic nomination, which I think he will. But if he is cheated, we will rise up, because people love a good protest vote. The next defense the Clintonistas, the blindly with her crowd, likes to lie about is that the Bernie or bust crowd derails Hillary's preordained coronation, and that will give the Republicans the ability to appoint 4 Supreme Court justices. Oy vey. Hear me loud and clear, dear listener. The only way President Hillary Clinton gets to appoint 4 Supreme Court justices is if she kills 4 members of the Supreme Court. None are retiring. None are considering retiring. The only one who's hinted about the possibility is Justice Kennedy. And when he hinted, he implied he would wait for a Republican president. So this bunch of bunk, big bunch of bunk that Hillary's campaign is scaring her supporters with. And you keep hearing it repeated by respectable people. Frankly, it pisses me off. To hold the conscience of the party hostage over an idle threat. It's cheap, disgusting politics. Our votes are our own. And to have a party and advocates of the lesser supported candidate like Clinton tell us we don't have a choice, it's an attack not only on progressives as a member of the same party, but an outright assault on the principles of democracy. If the party loses, it's not because of those voters the party alienated, who are a majority of the party now. It's not because the people who stayed home because they didn't like or trust a party's candidate enough to participate. If the party loses, it's because the party refused to support its membership. The party catered to establishment interests. Bernie has more supporters in crowds and individual fundraiser. He is the front runner, and he's been denied that respect by the Democratic National Committee. He's been denied that respect by the mainstream media cartels, and he's certainly been denied that respect by the Clinton campaign. They must be taught a lesson by his supporters, by us, because they've been treating the supporters as subhuman. We are not subhuman. We are a political movement that you will reckon with, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Barney Frank, and other party members trying to submit and subvert the will of the people. Take notice. That's another thing that pisses me off. People like Chris Matthews on MSNBC or Barney Frank going on every show he can saying that Bernie has always opposed the Democrats. More lies. And they try to pass them off so freely, but it's really just a bunch of bullshit. Bernie always caucused with the Democrats. So much that the Democrats put him in committee leadership so many times. They sent then Senator Barack Obama, a rising force in the party, to Vermont to campaign for Bernie Sanders. Though Bernie is the longest serving independent in Congress, which is a very good thing, especially in this age of 2 corrupted political parties distorting the will of the people, he's always had the greatest respect and relationship with the Democrats. He was the campaign chair for his dear friend Jesse Jackson when he ran as a Democrat. Bernie just had the foresight to never align with the party. It didn't represent his views entirely, and Bernie's an authentic guy, so he didn't sign any dotted line. Just like every other issue, really, Bernie Sanders was on the right side before the rest of us were hip. I, for one, will not remain a Democrat past trying to elect Bernie Sanders this primary season unless we overall are a corrupt and immoral party, because DNC chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz recently announced she was selling seats at the DNC to lobbyists. That's right, at the Democratic National Convention, she's selling lobbyists top dollar seats. She's not just trying to sell her soul, she's trying to sell the souls of our firstborn as well. She's disgusting and ironically anti-democracy, since her title is chair of the Democratic National Party. This is a corrupt system, and we the people need to put an end to it. Just as a good patriot is always questioning his or her country and pushing for the most ethical practices of governing, a good political party member is one who pushes party leadership similarly. Currently, the DNC is corrupt. A good number of progressive Democrats are trying to clean it up. Complacent Clinton supporters who go along with the conspiracy to preordain and coronate the less popular Hillary, they are an enemy to the party and democracy itself. How can we expect to point fingers at the GOP in the general election if our own party is on the take and so unethical? How can we take the high road on the issues when the Clintons and their cohorts and political extremists like Third Way are in power of a party that doesn't represent the majority of its members? The lesser of two evils argument is null and void. Both parties are so evil, we need a movement to embrace a policy of no evil. That's what Bernie Sanders' People's Campaign is about, and why it means so much to so very many of us, and why Bernie or bust just makes sense to us. We want a good person in the Oval Office for a change, not someone we compromised for on being less evil. So let's look at the GOP versus Hillary versus progressives on the issues. As far as I can see, the only thing status quo Democrats like Hillary Clinton and progressives like Bernie Sanders agree on are abortion rights, gun control, and LGBTQ rights. And in my humble opinion, Bernie's been stronger on all three of those issues. Let's start with healthcare. The GOP wants to deregulate the marketplace entirely and let insurance companies gouge you and refuse you healthcare. Hillary Clinton and her lot want to regulate the insurance industry a bit, but they want to mandate that every citizen has to purchase services from that private insurance industry. In my opinion, both of these schemes are outrageous. They're obscene. They hurt the American citizen. Bernie and the progressives, they want healthcare to be a right of all citizens. They want to bust up a corrupt industry, not make you do business with it or face tax penalty. Just like banking and Wall Street, the GOP wants it completely unregulated. The establishment of the Democratic Party wants, I'm going to call it the illusion of regulation, because really what they want to do is rig the economy in favor of that industry. Progressives like Bernie Sanders and Liz Warren want the economy to work for the American citizen, not a private industry. So there's virtually no difference between the GOP and establishment Democrats like Hillary Clinton on foreign policy. Both embrace this bomb first, ask questions later philosophy and want to give weapons manufacturers and the merchants of war the ability to dictate our foreign policy. That's not what progressives want. Progressives want to make the interests of the American people to be the primary motive when deciding foreign policy. Not foreign governments, not private industry. More of that. I should have started with money in politics. If politicians truly only cared about the polls, we would have seen action on campaign finance reform by now, because 80% of Republicans, 90% of Democrats, and 85% of the independents say that this is one of the most important issues in America. So we have this large agreement amongst the American people beyond the borders of our partisan politics. We could all come together on this very simple issue for campaign finance reform. But the politicians, except for Bernie Sanders and a couple of others, they care more about war profiteers. They care more about big business. They care more about the media cartels than actually passing legislation with such support from the American people. Both the GOP and the DNC love the current lackadaisical campaign finance rules. They want to rake in the dough in return for favors to private industry. Progressives want publicly financed campaigns, so that a politician is always only in debt to their constituents. That's who politicians are supposed to be in debt to. Constituents, not corporations. Fuck you, Citizen United. Perpetual war. Both Hillary Clinton and her Republican counterparts want to appease the ratings of the media cartels and the investment of the military-industrial complex by perpetuating an unending war on terror in the Middle East and beyond for the rest of humanity's time on Earth. I know this is lofty language I'm using, but it really kind of sums up their foreign policy. It's just put our dicks in the wind and wave them around. Let's bomb and fight and kill. They don't think about it. They don't even consider the future or diplomacy. Only Bernie Sanders wants to be tough on ISIS, but through international coalitions with friendly Muslim nations who, to be honest, bear the load on this. They're the ones being murdered by ISIS far more than Americans. Only Bernie makes it clear that he's against perpetual war and he wants to concentrate on making the American dream accessible to all Americans. That's the priority for Bernie Sanders, not endless regime change and hope that we finally get one right. Bernie has the strongest veteran support because they know he won't send soldiers into harm's way without just cause. And when they return, they'll be taken care of fairly under President Sanders. Compare that to the high level of veterans who say they just don't trust Hillary Clinton, which is a vast majority. And you know who has the support of America's brave military men and women? It's Bernie Sanders. Let's talk criminal justice reform. The GOP and the establishment Democrats both want to continue raking in money from private prisons and police organizations. They want local police outfits to continue to be armed like many countries are to help the profits of weapons manufacturers. They want to continue to make it harder for poor people, mostly people of color, to vote and assert their civil liberties. Progressives want a complete overhaul of the system, however. We want every citizen to be treated fairly and equally in the eyes of the law. You know, the way the 14th Amendment promised us it would. Which brings us to the war on drugs. Both Republicans and establishment Democrats want to continue this ineffectual and costly war on drugs to filter money to police, weapons manufacturers, and hell, the liquor lobby, the prescription drug manufacturers. Progressives want regulated, taxed, legal marijuana, and to put treatment above incarceration, helping addicts out of the system and into productive lives. We want to hurt the livelihood of the traffickers, the dealers, the true criminals. Instead of building the profits of Hillary Clinton's private prison mega donors on the backs of the citizenry, let's help the American people. One of the shadiest things going on in this country is how many opiate addicts we're churning out. They start out prescribed on painkillers and then end up on heroin because it's cheaper. See how these issues tend to fold into one another? That's why we need a big vision thinker and idealist in leadership. We need prescription drug reform. We need criminal justice reform offering treatment for drug offenders. And frankly, though Bernie hasn't said anything like this, he has said we need to audit the Fed, which makes me think in a different direction that we have to make sure our intelligence agencies aren't still in control of black market opium trade around the world, the way they were in the 80s and 90s. I'm sorry, I got off topic there because this is an issue that concerns me. I have a grandmother I believe is addicted to prescription opiates. I've known friends and coworkers who've, for lack of better terminology, they've lost out to opiate addiction. I read about this issue nonstop in newspapers in both my hometown and my adopted home city, and I'm worried that so many lives and families are being destroyed when we could make a difference by cracking down on both prescription drugs and being more empathetic with our sentencing when these people finally go down the wrong path and get in trouble, and that we should be offering a quality of health care in this country that people aren't just dispensed opiates like candy, and that if they do fall down the dangerous road leading to addiction, that we have a treatment plan. We have a way to treat our fellow Americans. I'm sorry, I got way off task there, but let's get back to the task at hand. Let's lighten the mood with Frankenfood. I'm just kidding. There's nothing funny about the corruption of our food supply. The GOP and Hillary agree on letting Montesano continue corrupting the food supply. While progressives want states' rights for food labeling, for safety control, and consumer protections, Hillary Clinton's staff, well, what isn't made up of Wall Street types, is made up of Montesano executives. The Republicans and Hillary Clinton want to hand over the food chain to one private industry. Progressives like Bernie Sanders, who've been on the right side of the issue, like all of these issues, for so very long, want food safety to be the priority, American safety to be the priority, not making a law to benefit a Franken-food monopoly, not protecting them from the law, which is meant to protect the people. Next up, I want to talk privacy rights. Though every expert in the field says the attack on Americans' right to privacy has no bearing on the war on terror and hasn't apprehended a single terrorist suspect, both the GOP and the DNC want to take away more and more of your liberties and privacy rights because data collection helps analyze and control the masses, both for the purpose of governing and marketing. And that's what they're doing. They're marketing to us. They're not governing us. Progressives want to protect the American citizenry. We want to promote the very things that the others attack. We want better encryption, less spying, and greater overall privacy. The heart of that is freedom to information. Both Republicans and establishment Democrats like Hillary Clinton want to limit our access to the internet under this weird guise of security, but in fact, to bilk more dollars and control by the 6 media cartels. They own our internet, our television channels, our telecom companies. Progressives want to stop this equivalent to modern day book burning. Progressives want to make sure that the internet stays open, free, and offering unprecedented access to free information and communication. That's what life in the space age is supposed to be about. We're not supposed to rein it in, make it inaccessible to people. We don't want to turn the average citizen into criminals for having to go to the dark web to research anything. Do you see the pattern here? I mean, it's pretty clear. Both of the two parties, both the DNC and the GOP, put private industry before the public, before the American people, before what's ethical. This is true for every issue, really. It's why we have bank bailouts, but not FDR-like infrastructure jobs programs. It's why we have NAFTA and the TPP and Obamacare instead of health care as a right, family leave, security. Progressives, we want the opposite of the DNC. We want the opposite of the GOP for certain. We want a society that puts the people before private industry. We want a return of the American dream where any citizen can provide for their family and with just a little luck and hard work can make something of themselves. The Democratic establishment and the Republican National Party, they want you to forever be under the thumb of big business, to be a slave laborer and to cripple your upward mobility. That's not the American dream. Now, out of fairness to the GOP, though I stand behind everything I have attributed to them as party policy, their current frontrunner, Donald Trump, he doesn't talk about policy. He rarely addresses any of these issues. Instead, he uses his demagoguery and blames different cultures of brown people for things being fucked up, but he just says he'll bring on the best people when asked about policy points, and then, I don't know, insults a woman or something. I mean, seriously, you've got to be fucked in the head to be supporting this guy. This guy who linguistic experts say speaks at a 5th grade level and says absolutely nothing about policy or the actual issues that Americans, we deal with every day. The only area he's given some detail on is his tax plan, and it doesn't actually reduce taxes on poor or middle-class Americans. It just does for his billionaire buddies, but he clouds it in these percentages instead of fact, and the boneheads who lap up all the other piss and vinegar he spews just go along. And that's the guy poised to defeat Hillary Clinton. I mean, she's practically neck and neck with Trump in national polls, and now they're looking at polls that say 20% of Democrats are stupid idiots too because they'll vote for Trump. Not that I think Hillary would be a better president. I certainly think she would be more corrupt. He's just more stupid. I'm Bernie or bust, because for me, Bernie or bust is the same as America or bust. Any of these other clowns completes America's transition from democracy into oligarchy, just as President Carter has warned us about. Thank goodness Bernie Sanders. Thank goodness for Bernie Sanders. Despite what corporate media force feeds us, Bernie is at the head of the most popular campaign in the history of these United States, and thankfully he defeats Trump handily in the polls. And he brings over a good number of Republicans in those polls, a lot of independents, and what could potentially be the largest voter turnout that we've seen in modern history. Thanks to Bernie Sanders, there's actually hope. So the choice is clear. A revolution is afoot, not only to save the Democratic Party from itself, but to save the American way of life. We need to make our voices heard. We need to elect Bernie Sanders, because anything else is a loss. It's Bernie or bust. Bernie or bust. It's America or bust. I'm Michael Salamone, reminding you to please be good to one another. Cheers. Salamone is a podcast recorded for a streaming internet audience. Our archives can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, all the places you can find podcasts these days, and at michaelsalamone.com. I think you should subscribe.